4. Rick Barry. At this point in time, Rick Barry is best remembered as the guy who shot free throws granny style, which is a shame because Rick Barry is so much more than that. He is a 12-time All-Star, an NBA champion, a Hall of Famer, and is remembered as one of the biggest in NBA history. Now, you might think that's a big claim, but just trust me, Rick Barry was known as such a jerk that even his teammates despised him. Just listen to these quotes from his fellow players and a Warriors executive. He had a bad attitude. He was always looking down at you. Robert Parrish. He lacks diplomacy. If they sent him to the UN, he'd start World War III. Mike Dunleavy. You'll never find a bunch of players sitting around talking about the good old days with Rick. His teammates and opponents generally and thoroughly detested him. Former Warriors executive Ken Macker. So yeah, that kind of hate from his teammates leads us to the first weird story about Rick Barry. Let's jump to Game 7 of the 1976 Western Conference Finals, where Barry is leading the defending champion Golden State Warriors against the Phoenix Suns. Now, the Warriors at the time were also the favorites to win the NBA championship in 1976, but that didn't happen. And the reason that didn't happen is that in the first few minutes of Game 7, Phoenix Suns player Ricky Sobers started a fight with Rick Barry and got a few punches in before other Suns players stepped in and stopped the fight. After this, the incident seemed to be over, but then at halftime, Barry watched the footage of the fight and realized that none of his teammates tried to help him at all, and instead were perfectly content to watch him get punched. So, to get back at his teammates, Rick Barry, a man who averaged 20 shots a game, decided that he was simply not going to shoot the ball in the second half as a weird form of protest. By the end of the game, after passing up several open shots, Barry got what he wanted, I guess, as the Warriors lost the 6-point lead they held going into the half, and the Suns eventually won the game and went to the NBA Finals. So yeah, Rick Barry throwing away another chance at an NBA championship because his teammates hated him was weird. But that's not the weirdest thing Rick did in his career. The weirdest thing would have to be that in the same 1976 season, Rick Barry wore a wig for the entire year. If you don't believe me, there is plenty of evidence. Here's Rick in the 1975 finals. Notice a clear bald spot. Then here's Rick in the 1976 season. Notice the strange animal that has attached itself to his head. So to sum everything up here, Rick Barry was an awesome basketball player, one of the worst teammates of all time, and is very, very lucky that he played before social media, because I can only imagine how many times he would get roasted for wearing a wig during games. Number 3. Dave Cowens. Going from a player that everyone hated to a man everyone loved, let's talk about Dave Cowens. Now, in the early to mid 1970s, Cowens was a great basketball player and the Celtics were a great basketball team. They were so great, in fact, that Cowens was named the league's MVP in 1973, and Boston won the NBA championship in 1974 and 1976. It was after that second championship, though, that Dave began to ask himself, is there more to life than basketball? And so he did what any 27-year-old NBA star in their prime would do after winning their second NBA championship. He decided to begin the 1977 season with a 2-month break that saw him take a job at a local racetrack. And as if that wasn't enough, let's fast forward to the 1977 playoffs, where Dave Cowens has returned to the Boston Celtics and is currently in a playoff series against the San Antonio Spurs. It was during this series that on one of his off days, Cowens decided to rent a taxi and spend the day driving around Boston collecting fares. Yes, an NBA All-Star spent an off day during the 1977 playoffs working as a cab driver. To you, this probably seems ridiculous, but the reason Cowens got the taxi in the first place kind of makes sense. As he remembers, one of his good friends from Kentucky visited him, and so Dave thought thought the best way to show him around was to rent a taxi, which is strange but understandable, I guess. What wasn't understandable was what happened next. As Cowan said, the two of us started driving around in the cab together. Then we found out that people didn't want to get in the cab with the two of us, so I made him get out and he went and did some things for a while. Yup, Dave Cowens kicked his good friend out of the cab and then spent the rest of the day driving the taxi around like a real cab driver. Jason Terry. It's perfectly normal as an athlete to have some superstitions. Maybe you eat the same meal before every game. Maybe you slam your head against the basket support before the game tips off. You get the point. Superstitions in general are normal, but sometimes they can get a little bizarre. That is certainly the case with Jason Terry, as during the season, on nights when his team has a game the next day, Terry has to go to sleep wearing the shorts of the team he's about to play. And these can't just be normal NBA shorts that anyone can buy. They have to be real NBA basketball shorts that have been worn in a real NBA basketball game. So in order to get pairs of game-worn shorts from every one of the 29 other teams in the NBA, Jason has established a network of equipment managers and former NBA players that hook him up before games. Because of this superstition has become so well known that the Spurs have even tried to trick Terry with the shorts they give him. Apparently, they do this because in 2006, Jason punched Michael Finley during a playoff game. So in order to get back at him, the Spurs gave him a pair of practice shorts to sleep in instead of regular game-worn shorts. And yes, after sleeping in these practice shorts, Jason Terry's team did lose to the Spurs the next night, proving that even when it comes to weird superstitions, Pop is still one step ahead of everyone else. And number one, Lamar Odom. It is no secret that in recent years, Lamar Odom has battled some serious addictions that almost killed him. I made a separate video on that, and the link will be in the description if you want to watch it. But before we knew about Lamar's addiction to hardcore drugs, we thought that one of his other near addictions was actually kind of funny. Because in his time with the Lakers, it came out that Lamar Odom was borderline addicted to candy. This all started during the 2009 playoffs, where Odom claimed that the reason he played well in games 5 and 6 of the Western Conference Finals was that he ate candy for breakfast. This was certainly news to some people at the time, as candy hardly seems like the best food for an athlete to eat before a playoff game. And so reporters dug deeper and found that Lamar Odom didn't just occasionally eat candy for breakfast. Instead, his whole diet seemed to basically revolve around candy. In a segment with ESPN, Lamar's assistant showed everyone just how much candy Lamar needed at one time, as he would go on to fill an entire shopping cart with different kinds of candy. Lamar would end this segment by declaring, "You only live once, so eat as much candy as you can eat." And he definitely lived up to those words. Teammates revealed that Lamar would bring bags of candy to every shoot-around, and that at the trainer's table, you could find Lamar eating candy while the trainer worked on him. And when asked directly about his candy habits, Lamar revealed that he goes through 4 to 5 bags of Hershey chocolate a day on top of the bags of Skittles, gummy rings, and Starbursts he also eats. This habit of eating candy at all times eventually got to the point where Lamar would wake up at 3 a.m., eat a handful of candy, then go back to sleep apparently refreshed. Unfortunately though, this absurd diet eventually caught up to Lamar when he played for the Dallas Mavericks, and when combined with his other addictions, was the reason he retired from NBA basketball at just 33 years old.